The story is Roly Poly Riley and Friends, Tales of a Cat's Life by Greta Cole. Roly Poly Riley was a Persian cat who belonged to my 77-year-old neighbour, Mrs. Roberts. Even though he had the unfortunate look of a creature who disliked his expensive prime jelly meat meal and just looked downright grumpy, he had such a loving nature. Despite his looks, he was actually the smoochiest mog I've ever encountered. There's Roly Poly Riley. To get a bit of love and attention, he would always roll onto his back directly in your path. He just adored being scratched on his jelly belly. He would often put a smile on my face when I got home from work, and there he was leaning up against the fence, legs apart, totally relaxed, soaking up the rays of sun. Just too cute. The thing about Roly Poly Riley was that he would often be gone for days at a time. Mrs. Roberts was often beside herself with worry, and just when she thought she would put a flyer up around the neighbourhood for a lost cat, he would turn up. But the funny thing was, he would always bring home another funimal. Funimal is a furry animal that Riley viewed as a friend and could have fun with. This time it was a one-eyed black and white Jack Russell Terrier named, you guessed it, Jack. Here's Jack. He's a Jack Russell. His close friends called him Captain Jack because he had a black spotted patch around his blind eye. It looked just like a pirate's patch. What a comical scene indeed. Riley prancing down the path with his jelly belly swinging side to side with a highly strung newfound friend close at his heels, or should I say paws. Mrs. Roberts was always in a state of bewilderment. How on earth could a cat like Riley befriend a boisterous little creature like Jack? "Where on earth have you been?" Mrs. Roberts inquired in her chattery, high-pitched voice, looking for Riley. Both Riley and Jack looked as though they had been rolling in a pile of compost, and oh, the smell. "You're not coming into my house looking and smelling like that. Take your paws somewhere else, thank you." Riley knew that Mrs. Roberts wasn't happy. Jack couldn't understand her rambling, but guessed that she didn't want them around. As she was turning to leave, Mrs. Roberts grabbed Jack by the red bandana and said, "Hey, what have you got there, boy?" Jack did indeed have something in his mouth, but he wasn't going to give it up lightly. It was his trophy that he got for the day, and he was going to put it in a box of dog treasures. There was a bit of tug and war between Jack and Mrs. Roberts, but alas, Mrs. Roberts won out and retrieved the item. It was all rather grubby. At first glance she couldn't make out what it was. She hobbled over to the garden hose and gave it a good wash down. Here we are. Something that was found by Jack the dog. What do we have here?" Mrs. Roberts mumbled. When closely inspecting the item, she had both intrigue and excitement in her voice when muttering to herself. What she was holding was a glistening greenstone-shaped pendant. It had a hole in the top where a bit of leather or chain would have been threaded through. "Boys, where did you get this?" Jack, of course, not really understanding what Mrs. Roberts was saying, got an indication by her hand gestures of what she was asking. So he turned his paws and trotted off down the pathway along with Riley, who of course was trying to be one step ahead. Mrs. Roberts, being born with club feet which made her hobble horribly, hopped on her mini-scooter and followed the pair. Just down the end of the road from Mrs. Roberts' house there was a park, which used to be the local rubbish dump. These days it was a lovely garden for all the community to enjoy. It had all sorts of unusual plants that attracted the bird life. It was such a lovely, peaceful place. Riley and Jack went over to a corner of the park behind some flax bushes, waiting for Mrs. Roberts to catch up. My, she said, "You boys have been having a wee scrummage around, haven't you?" The three of them were hovering over a dug-up section of dirt which had some interesting bits of clumps and bumps in it. "Get back, boys. Methinks we have to cordon off this area. It seems as if you've found something of historical significance." Next thing, Mrs. Roberts was picking up broken tree branches and sticking them in the ground surrounding the dug-up area. She took off her multicoloured scarf and wrapped it around the branch sticks. Back, lads. We don't want to disturb any more of the area, and we need to contact the local authorities to check the site over." Here we are. Police coming in. At this point, a small group was starting to gather around. Mrs. Roberts instructed one of the teenage kids to ring 111 on the cell phone. Tell them this is an emergency and we need some officials to come down to Willow Park to examine a site that may be of national significance. The teenager thought she was off her rocker but did what she was instructed, as was always told by the parents and teachers to respect your elders. It didn't seem long before there was heard a screech of sirens and bright lights flashing. 4 big burly policemen got out of 2 police cars. It certainly seemed as if they were on a mission. Stand back, people. We don't want the scene of the crime site to be touched in any way. Mrs. Roberts piped up. Look here, cops. It was my 2 animal friends that discovered the site, and here's an item of interest. She held out the greenstone pendant. Very interesting indeed, one of the cops responded, taking the pendant. We'll need to take this back to headquarters and get it checked over, and in the meantime we need to have the park totally cordoned off. Thanks, lady, it seems like you and your 4-legged friends have done a good job marking off the area of interest. It wasn't till about a week later there was a write-up in the local newspaper. Front page, in fact, with a large photo of Riley, Captain Jack and Mrs. Roberts. They were looking rather chuffed with themselves. It was headed, Long Lost Pendant of Queen Thankyou found. Riley was the one wearing the pendant around his neck. He always had to be the one who stole the show. The article read that the trio had found a site of historical significance, believed to be where a native Maori tribe roamed, and the item of interest belonged to the tribe queen, Thankyou. Here's the picture. There had been many stories and legends about the Maori Queen being very wise and generous, who was known to have a large array of greenstone jewellery. This one of interest was a whale silhouette design with its tail shaped into a hook. This is the one Mrs. Roberts tackled from Jack's mouth. Legend had it that the Queen caught many a fish using that pendant to feed her family and tribe. Now, it being found, it could be confirmed the Maori Queen and her tribe did actually exist. The pendant, along with the other items found at the site, were now in the hands of the National Museum. They in turn gifted Riley and Jack a lifetime of premium pet food, and Mrs. Roberts a flash-shiny new mini-scooter. Not bad for a day's work. That was the story Roly Poly Riley and Friends. Tall Tales of a Cat's Life by Greta Cole.